Hey guys, welcome back to Deep Space. My name is Ben, and today we're going to be talking about probably one of my very favorite things in all of counseling and psychology. What we're talking about with cycles is we're talking about the ways that I affect you and you affect me, and how those two effects can come together to create something with a life of its own. So this is how this ends up looking, right? I hope you can see this. This is my first time with any sort of high-tech whiteboard technology in the videos, so we'll see how it all turns out. But I'll just draw this for you really quickly. So this is how they look. Here's me, and here's you. So you're one side of it, I'm the other side of it. Where you figure out where this begins is you look for the deepest emotion. What is this actually about? This is one of the reasons why I love cycles. What we're doing here at Deep Space is all about exploration in the first place. Is we're exploring and we're using MindSight to identify what some of these emotions are, what's going on inside of us. So we're going to use that skill of looking inward, and we're going to identify, okay, so at the core of this, how do I really feel? So we put that emotion down here. This is our primary emotion. This is a deep emotion. So primary goes there. What happens is I have an emotion about that emotion. I have a secondary emotion. Secondary comes next. This is a lot just how our behavior works in general, even apart from the cycle. This is kind of how we're wired, from a feeling to an action. Usually at that next point we have a thought. This is where we're kind of interpreting what's going on with this emotion, the secondary emotion, it's where we start to make meaning, we start to make sense of it. And then we have an action. So you can see how just primary emotion at the bottom, secondary emotion about it, thought, and then an action. And what that does, it's really crazy how this works. Okay, so you have on your end, you've got your primary emotion, and then you've got a secondary emotion about it. Great handwriting here, by the way. Then you have a thought, then you have an action. So stick with me, I know this is a little bit thick, but it's really helpful when you see how it all comes together, because look at how this all works. This action right here that you're doing is a major contributor when a cycle is working. It doesn't happen all the time, but when there's a cycle, this action is a major contributor to this primary emotion that I'm feeling, which is making me have a secondary emotion, which is making me think about it, which is making me act. And that action that I'm doing out of this primary emotion, based on what you've been doing, makes me act in a way that makes you feel the primary emotion that made this happen, that led to your action, that made me feel this way. And this thing just repeats itself tons and tons of times. Does that make sense? Here's a version of that I've experienced in my own life recently. I actually have been talking to my wife about it. So I've got 3 little kids, and they can be a handful. It require a lot of energy. They take, the noise level can be really high. After a long day of work for me, sometimes they can be a lot. Well, I had the brilliant idea. We bought 2 American Bulldog puppies, which are a handful. And we mixed them into that mix of these 3 little kids. So my wife and I were experiencing a lot of like hair pulling out moments of like, this is kind of crazy. High energy, high intensity, stuff like that. So I found myself falling into a cycle like this, like we're talking about, with my kids and with the dogs. The dogs actually were affected by it too, which is crazy that something this basic for humanity could show up in the animal kingdom too, but it totally did. So here's what happened, right? So here's me, and here's what we'll call the littles. On one hand over here, my deepest feeling, right? Okay, so I'm gonna be vulnerable with you guys for a little bit. Probably the deepest thing that I was feeling at that moment, probably feeling like a failure. Probably feeling like when they would fight with each other, or the dogs would be crazy, the kids would be crazy, I would be feeling like I'm not a very good dad. I can't seem to manage this. I can't seem to take this and turn it into something easy and turn it into something smooth, and instead it's really choppy and it's stressful. So down here, I'm feeling like a failure. And in the middle of it, I'm feeling like super stressed. Feeling really stressed out by the experience and by this feeling of feeling like a failure. The thought that I was thinking is probably something along the lines of, fix it, in all caps. So that's all in all caps. I was writing down fix caps. And then what I would do to try to like fix it in that moment from that place is I'm not fixing it well, I'm like lashing out. I'm lashing out in a way that made my kids feel, and my dogs probably feel, some version of like unsafe with me. And I don't mean that like I don't hit my kids, I don't hit the dogs, but like feeling some version of unsafe. And that kind of made them freak out. And when they freaked out, I can't tell you exactly what their thought was, but what their action was at the top was to act out. They're stressed, they're freaked out, and so because of it, they're not behaving like solid, they're not feeling good, they're feeling super stressed, so they would act out. Now look at the way that this works. When they act out, I feel like a failure. And when I feel like a failure and get stressed and try to fix it and I lash out, I make them feel super unsafe. And the more unsafe that they feel, the more that they freak out, and the more they freak out, the more that they act out. And we were falling into this cycle. We had a couple months of just like, man, this is crazy. These kids are just like not on their best behavior for a while. And these dogs seem to be stressed out too. And a lot of it came down to the more that they freaked out, the more that they acted out, the less that they behaved well, the more that I was feeling bad about myself, about my ability to manage this stuff, about my ability to be a good dad, which was stressing me out, which was making me want to fix it, which was making me lash out. This kind of stuff happens in relationships all the time. It is super common. I see versions of this in couples therapy. Pretty much every case that I have has some kind of cycle at play. So the really cool thing about it is once you can see it, when you can see that, look, okay, my lashing out at the dogs, at the kids, it's not helping me. It's not helping them behave better. It's not making me feel better. It just sucked, and it was making everything worse. And when I could see that, this is how you break them, right? You identify what's going on at this level, right here. You're not gonna probably be able to change this deep feeling. I can't make myself suddenly feel like, you know what, truth is, I don't feel like a failure as a dad ever. I feel great. That's a really hard thing to just change. It's a really hard thing to adjust, but I can change the way that I think about it. I can change the way that I think about what's happening. And instead of just thinking, I have to fix it, I have to fix it, instead of thinking about that, I can think about there's a cycle happening here. That cycle is happening right now. That thing that keeps making it worse is happening right now. I can think about that, and then so that doesn't make me want to lash out. That makes me want to do something more helpful. It makes me want to fix it. That makes me want to help them feel safe, right? I can see, because I can track this thing, because I'm using my mind sight, because I'm going deeper, paying attention to what's happening beneath the surface, I can see the way that I'm feeling. And I know that when I feel that way, I tend to do this stuff. And I know that that makes them feel this way. So instead, I'm gonna change my actions. I'm gonna see something else. I'm gonna think about it differently in a way that helps me. I'm gonna act based on a response, based on like, what do I wanna do? How do I want my kids and my dogs to feel with me? I don't want them to feel unsafe. I'm not an unsafe guy. Like, that's not like me. When I'm doing this, I'm not acting like myself. I'm acting like a reactionary, flipped out jerk. And that's not me. When I can recognize it and I can say from here, I can see it, then I can change the way that I behave, and that can change the way that they feel. Same thing with couples. When I recognize that every time my wife, and this is not us, but this is a really common one, every time that my wife gets upset with me and pursues me and tries to engage with me and gets mad, that I back away. And let's say I withdraw. It's a really common cycle, withdraw, pursue. So let's say every time that she pursues me, I withdraw. When I can see why I'm actually withdrawing, when I can see what's going on instead, I can say, all right, you know what? I feel like going out to the garage and having a beer and skipping this conversation because this conversation is making me feel, and I look down here, what is it that's making me feel? And then what I can do is, instead of bailing and avoiding, which is just making her feel the very thing that's making her attack me or making her pursue me, I can then instead say, okay, so what do I want to do? I'm going to talk to her about it. I'm going to talk to her about my primary feeling down here in a way that will help her feel something different down here. And then the cycle starts to break, and I start to form a new cycle where every time that I feel small, or every time that I feel insufficient, every time I don't feel good about myself, I actually engage with her and I talk to her about it, and then she feels something different too that leads to a different action too. And then before you know it, we got this new cycle where we're taking care of each other instead of like making each other feel worse and worse. You guys would not believe how common that stuff is. It's everywhere. It comes up all the time in our relationships. The secret of it is understanding what's happening and then recognizing the impact that you're having on the other person and changing what you see, right? When you're just caught up in a cycle like this, you're not seeing anything. These cycles are based on becoming reactive, just doing whatever feels natural. Instead, we're going to get intentional. We're going to see how we're feeling, using our mind sight, using our ability to go deeper, to recognize what's happening inside of us. And then when we see that, we can choose, rather than reacting and being driven by that, like some sort of autonomic, impulsive, underdeveloped, like instead of going animal where we just do whatever we feel like, we can choose. What's it like us to do? It's more like me to reach out to my kids and have conversations with them, to connect with them, to hold them, to love them. That's more like me. And I can choose to do that when they're kind of flipping out, when I can see they're kind of flipping out because of me. I hope that that can have an effect, that you can begin to identify some of those things within yourself. It's why I made Deep Space. It's why we're doing what we're doing, is to help people explore what's going on beneath the surface for them so they can identify some of those cycles, even within themselves. You can have a cycle with yourself where you treat yourself one way and it makes you feel something, and that thing that makes you feel makes you do the thing that made you treat yourself that way in the first place. So very best of luck to you as you're working on breaking some of those cycles. It can be done. I believe in you. I know you can do it. You don't have to be some sort of mental health expert. You don't have to have Jedi mind powers to be able to say, what's going on with me and what can I do differently with that in a way that actually gets me what I need, in a way that's actually helpful, instead of just creating the thing that's creating my problem in the first place. And you will be shocked how common that is, how often that comes up. And if you can see it, you can change it, which is a really cool thing. It's really cool to be with you guys. I'm having so much fun doing this with you. Thank you for joining me. If this is the kind of thing that you know of anybody that could be into, feel free to share these videos anywhere that you'd like. Subscribe, hit like. It's a pleasure doing this with you. I hope we can do it again soon. Thanks. All the best. Bye-bye.